Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Ming Yao. I'm the founder of Singularity Engineering, and today I'm pleased to do a short presentation for you
Hi
on
everyone, good
FDA
morning.
and
My name is Ming Yao.
simulations. I'm the founder of Singularity Engineering, and today I'm pleased to do a short presentation for you. Had some audio issues there, but I think we're all sorted out now. Yeah, so today I'm going to be talking about FDA and simulations and how simulations can help companies develop products faster and how simulations, engineering simulation results can help the FDA make better decisions. So before we start, I think it's good to talk a little bit about the company. My company is called Singularity Engineering. We're based in Oakland, California. We are a ANSYS certified channel partner. As such, we support the full suite of ANSYS tools, from fluid dynamics, structural mechanics, and electromagnetics, to things like material selection, optical engineering, simulation systems, systems simulation, even semiconductor capability. So we have a pretty wide range of tools available. Um, the ANSYS packages is very diverse. We focus on providing the best set of solutions for our customers in terms of software, services, and training. And this is kind of shows you all the tools we have available. ANSYS is constantly adding additional tools. For example, under optical, we have now the numerical set of tools. And ANSYS recently acquired Elestina, so this slide will keep getting longer and longer. Many people who are new to ANSYS may be familiar with maybe the structural side of things. If you're an electrical engineer, maybe you're familiar with some of our electronics capabilities, but the portfolio is always expanding and we're looking to provide better solutions to our customers. Being based in Silicon Valley and the San Francisco Bay Area, we focus on a few specific industries. We have a lot of expertise in electronics, semiconductor, as well as biomedical healthcare. And we're pretty unique in the way we work with our customers. We'll do consulting, training, and provide software or any combinations of the three to help our customers succeed. Um, Today, the main focus will be on FDA and simulations. I have a few slides here, and then we'll do a quick demo of a bone screw to show some of the very basic ways people would use simulation to supplement a FDA submission. All right, so let's go ahead with the presentation. Um, ANSYS has a long history of working with the FDA, and FDA in, I want to say, the past 10 years has really become more keen on making use of simulation to help them do their job better. This is a Center for Device and Radiological Health. They take care of biomedical devices, implants, and imaging systems. And their vision really is for patients in the US to have access to high quality, safe, and effective medical devices of public health importance first in the world. So this is really a big shift in the FDA. Historically, going many years back, FDA has always focused on kind of uh, safety and effectiveness above all else. Really, in lately, there's a goal at the FDA to help move products from development to a place where they can help patients. So this idea of being the first to approve these innovative devices is essential to the FDA. And obviously that goes along with the idea of having high quality, safe, and effective devices. So FDA really has this challenge of trying to balance how fast can they get the device out while still maintaining the quality, safety, and effectiveness that they're known for to focus on. So how do they do that? Some of the ways that the FDA measures itself in their success is how fast do they approve these novel devices. Novel devices include original PMA, panel track supplement PMA, and de novos. So you can see that over the years, they've had a fourfold increase in the number of novel device approvals per year. And you can imagine that there's a big effort to increase the speed of approval of these novel devices. For the FDA, this is very challenging because novel device takes more effort to understand how they work. You need more people, and uh, they also have the mission to keep all of these systems safe. So if we look at the CDRH, the Regulatory Science Priorities publication, so a lot of the FDA goals related to simulation is published in the various documentation they've released over the years. One of the key priorities in FDA's science priorities is to develop tools and method to improve and streamline clinical trial design and develop computational modeling technologies to support regulatory decision making. So you can see very specifically FDA, the CDRH specifically, is very much looking to use computational modeling to help them streamline development and reduce the burden associated with pre-market device evaluations. Whenever you develop a new device, I talk to lots of companies working on medical devices, and everyone has this big challenge of meeting FDA testing requirements, meeting their um, modeling requirements. So the FDA is looking at is very publicly stating that by developing computational modeling techniques, it can help them make decisions, and hopefully that increases the speed of um, of development of medical devices. Right? There's a lot of other interesting priorities they're working on. Obviously, looking at big data, looking at materials and biocompatibility. Um, Looking at real-world evidence and synthesis across multiple domains. But really, what we're going to focus on today is this idea of computational modeling of devices and how this can streamline development. So it makes the development of devices faster and also reduce burden associated with pre-market evaluation. So if you want to submit a pre-market approval to the FDA using the simulation tools and results you have in for your development and applying that as a part of the approval, and hopefully this can reveal information not available in traditional in vivo or in vitro assessments, and it can help to reduce the amount of burden associated with testing. So FDA's Office of Science and Engineering Laboratories is a group um, within the FDA, and they have four strategic areas with a specific call for computational modeling. So they want to use science evidence for medical device to help them make better regulatory decisions. Right? Traditionally, there's four types of models. You can test in obviously it's clinical trials is kind of the top line. You test in humans, and this is at the very end of the process, and when you know with almost certainty that your device will work. But the path of testing should kind of go in a loop starting from computational. Right? Computer modeling is oftentimes the fastest and the cheapest way to analyze the device. Different aspect of computer modeling will be provided below here. So there's a lot of ways we can simulate it. And simulation often goes well with benchtop testing. You need to ground your simulation models in some sort of real life scenario. So whatever you can test on the bench, you can typically run a simulation of it, and simulation gives you more details, more understanding of the system, and allows you to do much faster iterations. For example, this is some sort of pump system with a little volute and some impellers. And you can see this is the exact system being tested here with a flow going in and being pumped out of a certain area. So um, devaluing a device on the bench lets you do it in a controlled setting, but simulation here tells you the velocity contour everywhere within this domain. You can look at the shear anywhere within the domain, and this is very difficult to do if you're doing a bench level testing. It's hard to know what the shear is. You can get some overall quantitative value, but in terms of optimizing the design, improving efficiency, um, a lot of companies still rely on expertise and experience to do that. Once you have benchtop testing done, you can then move to animal testing and even clinical testing. So the four areas that FDA wants to focus for simulation are things like modernized toxology to enhance safety. Right? Can we simulate chemical reaction and biological reactions of the materials used in the device? simulate innovations in clinical evaluation of personalized medicine to improve product development and patient outcomes. We know that every person is different. Um, Devices can be customized to the individual to make it more effective. But also, if you have a device, can it be applied to different sizes of people, different shapes, maybe young and old, etc. So this idea of how do you explore the impact of your device on a lot of different people without going through a huge amount of clinical trials. This is the area where simulation can significantly help. Ensure FDA readiness to evaluate innovative emerging technology. Sometimes you may have a technology that's very special. There's nothing like it that exists, and you want to show that it's safe. But there's a lot of different concerns. We looked at. I was on a panel discussing stent reliability as related to the FDA, and one of their concerns is, well, they want to know when stents fail, right? But they can't really enforce a mandate for companies to test the stent until failure, because testing failure, what if the stent doesn't fail? Then the test could last much longer, and you're kind of punishing companies that make very good devices. So, if you have a very innovative device, one of the ways where you can provide additional insight to the FDA to help them understand how your device interact is through simulation. And finally, harness diverse data through informational sciences to improve health outcomes. So these are some of the ways in which simulation can help at the design level, but then allows you to use it to supplement or reduce the amount of bench testing, animal testing, and clinical testing needed to focus on those that are the most important. Okay. So this is a follow up from the types of from the previous slide. So simulation can be done today. I mean, with today's available computer systems and technology, simulation can be done for a wide range of devices in a wide range of scenarios. What traditionally is done is we would simulate a device, right? So if you're doing an insulin pump, right, we can simulate the device itself. If you're doing a stent, we can model the stent itself. You can pull on it, you can bend it, you can look at what the stresses are, what the deflections are. You can develop a blood pump, and we can look at things like hemolysis, shear, what the flow rates and such. Today, we have excellent tools that allow us to take scan data, CT scan, MRI scan, or other types of scan, and turn that into an anatomy model, which means we can actually put the device into the anatomy and see how it works. You may have an implant that goes into a specific part of the body, and we can look at how the anatomy and the device interact with each other. We can simulate physiology, chemical toxology, manufacturing of 3D devices. We have a whole set of tools dedicated to looking at how 3D printing of metals results in shape changes, crystalline structure changes, material changes, etc. We can simulate embedded devices. So a lot of devices today have software on it. We have tools that allows you to simulate how that software behaves and create certified code that allows you to ensure that allows you to significantly reduce the amount of verification of the code by having the computer generate much of the code for you. Right? This is a human machine interface or user interface simulation, and you can integrate that with various other analysis. Simulation as a device, we can simulate treatment outcomes, clinical imaging system, real world data. So usually this kind of goes from left to right in terms of how complex the modeling gets. We typically focus on simulation of device and the anatomy. We have some partners that allow us to simulate the physiology and maybe the chemical toxology, and ANSYS recently has some additional tools for device 3D printing. But also, this idea of verified code and simulating embedded devices as well as simulation as a device can be done as well. So in terms of some numbers, there was a survey that went out to the OSEL scientists. This is the Office of Science and Engineering Laboratories scientists. So they took a survey to see how much in their consulting review. So these scientists act as internal consultants to the FDA uh, when there are complex devices that needs additional insight. The FDA will bring in scientists from the OSEL, and they will help them understand the submission and ensure that it meets their requirements. So this looks at of the projects that OSEL scientists were pulled into, how many involved computational models and what stage they were. So the blue portion shows you that a lot of submissions today still do not have any computational models. But this sector is shrinking. I would believe, if you look 10 years back, there'll be a huge portion of this would not have any computational model. But you can see that a significant number of companies is now making use of computational models in their FDA submissions. So this is actually submission data. Right, there's a large number is using it during the pre-market approval process. Some are using it for clinical pre-market approval, I should say. Um, there are some that's using it for clinical trials, pre-submissions, and pre-market approvals. So people are using simulation data throughout the process. And obviously, if you have simulation data in a pre-market approval or at a pre-market stage, um, you can reuse that data, right, as you go forward to justify how you do the testing, what type of tests you've done, and how your simulation can supplement and um, bring more understanding in your submissions. Um, Let me check to make sure. And I kind of just oops, I kind of went on with the discussion here, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I should open up my link here for this window here. Yeah, for my chat page. So if there's any questions, feel free to put it into the chat. So in terms of computational models in regulatory submissions, the devices that's seen the most use of computational models are the ones that you'd expect. Orthopedic and cardiovascular devices, in terms of stress, strain, and durability, has been done. Simulations have been done for these devices for decades. So they're obviously very much involved in the regulatory submission side of things. Neurological devices, whether it's electrical or devices that affects the brain, are also seen having computational models submitted as a part of their application quite regularly. Imaging devices, so systems like MRI, where you may want to understand the effect of the magnetic field on any implants or that type of thing is being we see at the FDA sees a lot of submission in these systems as well as surgical devices. So the use of computational models, right? Computational models are often used to identify the appropriate bench testing configuration. So we've seen lots of companies where you may have a series of devices, and FDA obviously wants to know that every one of your devices is safe, right? You could have 6 versions of your device, different sizes, different shapes, maybe for different people. But in order to prove everything is safe, you normally need to do testing on every single device in its scenario to show that it's safe. One of the easiest ways to use computational models is to model all of your devices in their expected operating condition and identify the worst scenario. Is it the smallest device that's likely to fail first? Or is the most challenging to pass a test? Or is it the largest device? Maybe a particular scenario is by far the worst case. So instead of testing it on all, 6, 10, 20 versions of your device, you can identify the worst case scenario through simulation and then test that one scenario to ensure that your device meets the criteria. You can also use simulation to look at clinically challenging conditions in cardiovascular, orthopedic, or surgical implants. It's often difficult to test the system once it's implanted inside of a person. which means that simulation can be very helpful in identifying and providing more insight for the FDA, so that they have more confidence that your system will be safe, right? You may be able to test, you may be able to fulfill benchtop tests very well, but once it's implanted, um, having a simulation of the implant in place, undergoing kind of standard everyday activities, help to provide more details into how the system would work inside a person. And this may not be, it's not very easily doable um, from a test environment. Magnetic resonance system are a field safety. So there's two aspects of it. If you're developing a magnetic resonance imaging system, the safety of the system itself and how the magnetic field interacts with potential implants inside of a person is important. So you want to ensure the field strength is appropriate and there's no excessive heating of the implant. But also, if you're developing implants, you want to make sure that when you put it inside a MRI system, that it's safe to be in there. So you want to simulate this as well. We're recently talking to some folks who are very interested in actually both of those. We've talked to MRI companies and also companies developing implants, and talking about how they could use simulation efficiently to show that the device they've done is a derivative of an existing system, so that it reduces the amount of approval that's required. So you model your current system that's already been approved, then you run the simulation on your new device and say, well, the result shows that it's very similar, and since I have an existingly already approved device, then we can go ahead with getting a derivative approval for the new device. Therapeutic ultrasound, we can look at energy delivery in vivo locations and comparison of new and existing devices. So these are some of the typical use of the computational models. We see by far the most interest in identifying appropriate benchtop configurations to reduce the amount of testing. That's a great way to reduce the burden of testing for many companies. So here we have a few examples. This is a neurological device. It's a subcutaneous device recharging. This is a Medtronic Restore sensor, right? It's a recharge system. They wanted to look at the recharge system design. It's a wireless recharging. FCC regulations on specific absorption rate means that they need to make sure that during recharging, there is not a great deal of energy being absorbed by the human body. This device is placed under the skin to block pain for patients and needs to target a precise area of pain. So we have all of these electrodes to target that area. The ANSYS capability we used here is we did a Maxwell simulation to simulate the operation of the recharger. So there's a couple of coils. We modeled the device, put it inside of a human body, put a recharge coil on the other side, energize it based on the expected operating conditions, and measure the specific absorption ratio of the body tissue locally. So it's pretty easy to set up, and the solution time is quick. Um, we predicted the specific absorption ratio in the local body tissue, um, and the result was that it was orders of magnitude lower than what the FCC was concerned about. So FCC accepted the simulation result for the specific for certification of the neurostimulator recharger based on simulation itself without testing. So this type of quick analysis, you need to make sure you have data to support that it is safe, and simulation in this case is by far the easiest and fastest way to get that data. This is a self-expanding stent. So the engineering challenge for stent is many folds. We actually have a great stent training, so if anyone's looking at doing a simulation of stents, let us know. We'll point you to some great training material available on this topic. ANSYS supports both stainless steel balloon expanding stents as well as nitinol, so hyperelastic nitinol stents uh, for vessels and plaques. So stent design is important because it goes into a blood vessel, so any failure is is very devastating for the patient. We need to understand the life cycle of stress, strain, and fatigue to make sure that it does not fail in the expected time. It needs to be open. It needs to be able to open occluded vessels with minimal damage. So you don't want the stent to push too hard. You don't want it to be too soft either, that it slides around. Or too hard would put too much stress on the blood vessels. Too soft would cause it to potentially slide around. And the goal is to accelerate regulatory approvals. The stent shape is also important. There's a lot of these turns because it's pretty much a very complicated spring. If during the processing stage, if the stents are not designed properly, some of these tips could tip up, and that could cause the stent to dig into the vessel. So you don't want to have too much uh, stress concentrations in the blood vessel, right? So the ANSYS capabilities involves high accuracy, hyperelastic, and nitinol material model, right? So the stent itself is modeled as a nitinol in this case. Sometimes we've done balloon expanding stents as well. The blood vessel here is a hyperelastic blood vessel. There's multi layers, so we have the vessel and the plaque both modeled. Um, and this is very fast in setting up simulations. Usually stents are designed as a 2D cutout, kind of like this, and you got to wrap it into a 3D shape. So ANSYS has in our space claim tool, we have a easy to use capability that turns a flat stent like this into a cylinder ready to be inserted into a blood vessel. But before we do that, typically there's multiple steps of expanding, annealing, and you stick it into a mandrel, heat it up, anneal it, compress it back down, and then stick it into a vessel. So we model that entire process, and the outputs are things like stress, strain, outward radial forces, and fatigue safety factors. Orthopedic devices have been using simulation for a long time, as I mentioned previously. This is an example of a spinal implant. So the challenges are understanding spine biomechanics and tissue mechanical behavior. There are lots of papers written about the mechanical behavior of discs and bones in the spine. So this is a, a disc to separate the bones so that you can relax the pressure on nerves, and it helps people with damaged discs here. We can predict the interaction between the spine and the spinal implant, optimize the implant to meet physiological load requirements, and provide clinical evidence for surgery planning. So we have great biomaterial models available in ANSYS. Like I mentioned, there's hyperelastic models, there's nonlinear uh, plasticity and nitinol models, shape memory alloy models. Material model calibration tool, there's a spine and implant interaction simulation. And then in ANSYS, we can parameterize all aspects of the geometry of your implant. So we can do implant optimization per spinal loading environment and material model optimization. Um, I think some of the leading edge simulations these days involve having spine bones not as a uniform material, but based on bone density from a scan, we can get very accurate mechanical representation of the discs and the bones. So example outputs are things like stress and strain on the implant, optimize the implant structure, look at the range of motion, or also calibrating the material property for spinal tissue. This is an example of MRI safety. So, the idea of MRI safety is we want to ensure patients are safe in and during an MRI scan. You can determine the force and torque, as well as the specific absorption ratio near implants. So you may have implants somewhere inside the human body, and we can even determine the temperature rise during the implant device when it's put into an MRI system. So this is a coupled electrical thermal simulation. We can include a body perfusion model to take energy away uh, based on blood flow modeling. Uh, right? We can include the magnetic field, the human body model, and ANSYS for electromagnetics has very advanced automatic adaptive meshing. So it runs quickly and it does a frequency domain analysis, so it's very fast. Some examples are force and torque on an implant as a function of an MRI coil. So this is good for MRI system design, and you can do temperature near tissue um, for the implant. And finally, there's a lot of drug delivery examples. So if you have a external device, I've talked a lot about implants here, but for external devices, this is kind of the bread and butter of ANSYS. Most companies that's developing devices are already using simulation for device design, right? Mechanical durability, fluid dynamics performance, electrical antenna performance, etc. But specifically for inhaler type of applications, we may look at powder dosing, particle de-agglomeration, flow inside of airways, and particle deposition on device walls. ANSYS has very advanced multi-phase capabilities and tools. So this we can model particles, liquid, air interaction, or any of the above. So this really allows you to develop a better inhaler with a more efficient performance as well as more durability on the mechanical side. Okay, so that's a overview of some of the things that the FDA does. Now I'm going to show you a demonstration. Um, a quick example of what people will do. So this is the ANSYS. Let me show you this first. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the ANSYS Workbench environment, but this is the ANSYS Workbench. It's a unified multi-physics simulation environment that lets you study structural mechanics, so durability of your device, fluid dynamics, the blue icons over here, lets you look at blood flow in pumps, inhalers for air and particle simulation, or any other liquid um, flow phenomena. And then we have a full set of Maxwell equation solvers, HFSS and Maxwell, to look at motors and actuators as well as RF radiation. Depending on what the frequency is, we can use either a low frequency tool or high frequency tool. And all of this is easily combined together in the Workbench project page. So here I have an example of some bone screws. And this is pretty interesting. So ANSYS has a lot of ANSYS has been around for a long time, and a huge number of companies use us for biomedical devices. So there's some very tailored capabilities that's very useful. For example, here I have bones. I have bone screws that's screwed into the block, and these screws are just modeled as simple shafts. I'm not modeling the threads themselves in the block. So the first thing is that ANSYS has a wide range of material properties. So if we go to the materials section, we can look at different types of, let's do stainless steel. And you can see we have a huge range of stainless steel materials already uh, available. These materials have their fatigue curves. So these are estimated fatigue curves. If you're using a specific material, you always should double check these values and make sure they make sense. But these are kind of fatigue curves as well as plasticity models, thermal models, electrical resistivity models. If we're using stainless steel, you can see we can have a great set of materials. Well, bones. Unfortunately, we don't have any bone models available, but you can see that I do have a model for bone here under materials. So we have some information on the elastic modulus of bones, thermal conductivity, and isotropic resistivity. So we do have information on the bones. I get this information from our materials library called Granta Selector. Let me show this to you. And this is a great tool for any engineer because it opens up all of the materials available in the world to you for engineering to make your engineering decisions. Um, it's making me click on some buttons here, but the material selector has many other materials. For example, we can do a search for bones, and there is different types of bones. So we have the bone model, which I have shown here with mechanical properties: impact, thermal, healthcare, food, durability, and even whether it can be downcycled, biodegraded, etc. But we have femur bones, tibia bone, radius. So you can come in. There's teeth enamel. We have dentine, a bone-like structure that's made of collagen. We have even some cartilage information and muscle. So if this seems pretty amazing, I can show you the full material universe. So these are all the materials in our material universe, and we can chart things. So for example, let's say we're trying to look for uh, a material uh, that has pretty stiff properties. Maybe we'll plot it against the cost. Right? So we have a plot of Young's modulus here and the price. And this has now all kinds of materials here: plastics, honeycombs, foams, um, technical ceramics, um, and all kinds of stuff. Now, let's look at the stuff that we can use for biomedical applications. Right? So let's look for medical grade materials only, and we want this to be steam autoclave to be good and excellent. Okay. So we filtered out most of the materials in the universe here, and now we're left with some types of plastics, elastomers, metals and alloys, composites, and technical ceramics. And we can click on one of these materials. Right? You can see, depending on how soft or hard it is, if I need something hard, we have these materials here, stainless steel, that can allow us to meet our requirements, and it's by far the cheapest. Versus some platinum, iridium alloy, um, also very hard, but much more expensive. And you can see we can pick from any of these properties. We can keep filtering them down. Maybe we want some sort of durability under UV light, and this allows us to show. Should have filtered out some additional material, but right, it reduces some of the materials that was in between, so some of the silicon and the plastics got removed, and we can select a few of these things. So we can, for example, select these and look at a comparison. Um, we can do a find similar material, and it goes through and says, okay, we have some material that's similar to this. We can pick from these. So what I did here was I grabbed the bone data. Oh, and I should mention that all of these materials can be readily exported to ANSYS format. So if I go back here and say, well, this is the material we want. Uh, we can select this material. I guess there's an option to export this. We can select any of these materials and export to ANSYS Workbench form and a few other material library formats. So you can bring any of these material data directly into simulation. And that's what I did here. So I didn't have the bone materials already defined inside of ANSYS, but I exported my bone, my femur bone, as well as my tibia bone information into our material data. So once I've set up this simulation, this here I have a number of bone screws. I have 4 bone screws, each with a different diameter. And if we look on, and FDA publishes a lot of this data. Let me find that for you. Let's see. So we need a webinar for this one, right? So for orthopedic screws, right, there's draft guidance of different diameters of orthopedic screws and what kind of the torsional yield you can have. We have theoretical pullout strengths. So these are the performance criteria. So we have here 4 orthopedic screws. I have it at 5, 4, 3. I have 4, right? Yeah, 5, 4, 3, and 2 as the radius. So we have different, maybe 6, 5, 4, and 3 are the radius. So I have 4 of these screws here. I assign the material to each of the screws. So here they're made of a titanium alloy, and the base is a bone here. Then I support all of the bones, as you would expect in these blue surfaces, and we can apply the right amount of force, the pull-out force for each of these screws. So we have 468 newtons here. We have on the smaller screw, this is 237. This is 92, and this is 50.5. So oftentimes for comparison purposes, I like to set all of these simulations up in a single model. You can certainly do 4 separate models as well, but the tools are pretty efficient these days, so we can just have all of them compared directly. What's really interesting here is that ANSYS allows us to apply a special threaded connection between the screw and the bone. So the bone and the screw are just modeled as cylinders. However, we can assign a frictional contact between the two. And then we can model the both threads. So this actually looks at this mesh and try to model the both threads inside of that connects the screw to the bone. So the screw is not bonded to the bone everywhere, but it's actually bonded at the threads you define here. So we have a mean pitch diameter of 8 millimeters. This is like a 5 millimeter screw. So here we're modeling a 3 millimeter thread that would cut into the bone here. A pitch distance of 1 millimeter. So we have between the threads we have 1 millimeter, and the thread angle is 60 degrees. Thread type single threaded, and it's a right-handed screw. So you can define all of this explicitly in the model without modeling all of the details. And what this allows us to do then is look at the total deformation of the. So I apply the force, and you can see the largest screw actually deformed the most. I refine the mesh in the threaded region to try to increase the accuracy. You can see the threaded region is carefully modeled. This moves the most. The stress is the highest. Let's get rid of the wireframes. Here on the neck of my thickest screw. So if I was to apply for approval, I would say, well, based on these simulations, my large thickest screw is the one that's most likely to fail. So I would need to do testing on that, but the rest are much less in terms of the stress. So if the thickest screw passes, then the rest should be fine. Plastic strain, there's no plastic strain here. But look at the contact status. So remember I said we're modeling the threads themselves. We can make the mesh denser here, but it's resolving the contact not uniformly across the surface, but along the threads. We can look at the pressure at the contact. So where is the maximum pressure between the threads and the bones? Shows you here that in the top there's a lot of pressure, and then the pressure kind of reduces as we go deeper into the thread. Frictional stress, same idea. There's a lot of stress at the top where the screw meets the bone, and then as we go deeper, there's the stress reduces. So that's a simulation of 4 models. This is a fully nonlinear simulation because the contact here is nonlinear. It's a frictional contact. In addition, the material property is nonlinear. But here we have no plastic strain, so we never pulled it hard enough to fail. One of the things that the FDA have shown one of the things that the FDA have shown interest in is what are the stresses, what are the load to failure. So here we have an example of my loading to failure. I have a single screw here. I apply a 5 mm of displacement, and this is the type of deformation that happens when we pull on that screw. You can see we have necking and plasticity happening right in the center of the screw here. We can take a look at the plastic strain to show this part is failing. We have the equivalent stress shown here. Contact status, right? We have sticking here, and so here we have a lot of sticking right on the bottom of the screw here. The highest pressure is down here, up here, and frictional stress is as we've seen before. Um, you can see from a force reaction curve that plasticity is happening. Initially, we have the elastic plot, and as the plastic deformation kicks in, we can continue to deform the screw, but the amount of force does not increase significantly. So this is what we would recommend you look at if you want to look at a plastic deformation. If you want to look at something going to plasticity, if you want to test to failure. So if we look at the previous model here, the fatigue tool shows you that there's infinite life because the forces are very low for titanium here. But for mechanical analysis, for test of failure analysis, we can see that we need 17,000 newtons of force before plasticity occurs and maybe failure would occur. So that is a quick overview of the presentation and the demo here. I've shown you a presentation about the FDA, and the key takeaway is that much of the computational model submitted is used to the FDA, allows you to reduce the amount of testing done and still get acceptance of to justify reducing the amount of testing done in the simulation in a FDA submission. But also, as a part of any device design, simulation can be already very valuable to reduce the amount of prototypes and testing, and gives you additional insight into the model. And then I showed you a quick example of how you can do a quick comparison between 4 different bone screws according to the criteria laid out by the FDA. We allow you to compare deformation, stress, plastic strain. For screws in particular, ANSYS has all kinds of these little nice features. We can model the threaded contact to make an accurate prediction of where stress concentrations will occur and what the forces, pressure, and frictional stresses are in the model. And we can also model something to failure, which is oftentimes hard to do in practice. So modeling the testing to failure of a bone screw by pulling it by 5 millimeters and monitoring the deformation as well as the force reaction to see how at what point plasticity will begin to affect the device. So that's it for this presentation. I want to thank everyone for your time and listening in. It doesn't look like there are any messages, so I think that's it. If you're interested in contacting us, feel free to contact us at singularityeng.com. Like us on our YouTube page, subscribe, and let me know if there's anything else you're interested in. So have a great day. Bye bye.